Welcome back to the Recovery Channel. I'm Brian Ariel, Treatment Director of Outpatient Recovery Services at Applied Care Services. Today, we're going to talk about addiction and also something called impulsivity and compulsivity. And a lot of times, we may not understand these things and understand like what is happening, but this is key in addiction. The brain goes through these changes and we see a lot of these behaviors, which we would term impulsive and compulsive. And as we go through this a little bit, we'll find out that there's a difference between the two of them, and they actually work together to reinforce addictive behaviors. So in understanding impulsivity, it's something that's very quickly acted upon, and not a lot of thought goes into what you're going to do or the consequences of it. And a good example of impulsivity might be, hey, you're walking down the street, you see someone that you know, they say, hey, we're going out for drinks, you want to come with, and you really don't want to go with, or you really can't because you're on your way to like work or something, and then you just decide, yeah, sure, that's a great idea. So impulsivity, there's no forethought what could happen next, or what could the consequences be. You're just basically going and doing things, and it's acting really quick without really deliberating on pros and cons and things like that. And it's really about instant gratification. We call more hedonistic side of ourselves, where we're always constantly seeking pleasure. And compulsivity is where we engage in behaviors to ward off negative feelings. So those behaviors go even though we don't need them. So in the face of adverse consequences, we will repeat the same thing over and over again in order to get rid of or satisfy a certain feeling, try to get away from it. And even if it causes negative results. So a good example of compulsion might be, hey, every time that I feel anxious, I take a drink or I get high. And then we get linked into this as a behavior where every time I feel anxious or stressed, I take a drink, I smoke a joint, I take a puff, I do whatever it is to get away from that feeling. And it becomes the go-to thing. That is my compulsion. Every time I feel stressed or anxious or want to deal with something, instead of actually working through it, what I do is I go to the substance. Compulsive behaviors, they become habitual in nature, and we avoid things. So impulsivity and compulsivity, if we look at them, they team up. In an initial addiction, it's more of the impulsive things that are happening that bring us to those. So those seeking pleasure, getting away from things, and we're not really thinking through like, what could happen if I decide to get high today? Or what could happen if I decide to do X and I'm not thinking about Y? And compulsive happens after we've gained that habit of doing things. And then together, impulsivity and compulsivity work together in addiction to really keep us stuck. So we can agree that addiction is an acquired brain disease because it changes the structures in the brain. And both impulsivity and compulsivity play a role in the development of the addiction and the perpetuation of it. Though impulsivity might be more influential in the first stages of it, after we get going, compulsivity, we have to do it, takes over towards the mid to late stages of addiction. And to demonstrate this even further, there was an experiment done, and I can't remember what university, but they took a group of rats, and they were given, over 2 months, they were given unrestricted access to cocaine. And it was delivered by pushing a lever. And all the rats became, of course, addicted and heavy users of cocaine. But then after the 2 months, the researchers, they changed it. They changed the protocol. They changed their environment. And they would only deliver cocaine to the rats 70% of the time. And then 30% of the time, Then when the rats pushed on the lever, they received an electric shock. And by 4 days, this new protocol that they put in there, 70% of the rats stopped trying to get cocaine because they were delivered a shock. But 30% continued on despite being shocked. So that shows the impulsivity and compulsive. The rats were compulsed into using cocaine despite negative consequences. And a lot of times, that's what we see in addiction. It's no longer really the impulsive, it's more of the compulsive. But it's still an impulsive urge, avoiding pain, seeking pleasure, and then the compulsion is the behavior. I know how to deal with my displeasure or my pain, and that is what I must do. I must get high, I must get drunk. I'm avoiding a lot of things, and it becomes an ingrained behavior. Now, addiction isn't just that simple, but there's a lot of things going on. In this video, I just wanted to share how impulsivity and compulsivity work together to reinforce addiction. This is Brian Ariel, Treatment Director of Outpatient Recovery Services at Applied Care Services, wishing you be well and be mindful of what you're doing.